So hello, I'm Mark Cornall. I work for the GSMA. I'm one of the technical directors. I actually look after Open Gateway. So today we're not talking about APIs, not now. We're now going to talk about network slicing. And so today we've got the question today is, get the right one. If network slicing is the answer, then what's the question? Now for that, I've got an expert panel, briefly presented. So I'd like to welcome Alexandra Foster, who's Director of Division X from BT, and Ankush Saikia, who's Senior Manager of Networks Architecture from 3, and also Patrik, Rokyta, who's CTO from Titanium project. Welcome everybody, and nice to meet everyone. So I think we get into it, and when I first saw the question, I ended up thinking about Douglas Adams, and the answer is obviously 42. It's not network slicing, the answer is 42. But if we're not looking to the answer for life, the universe and everything, then, and the answer is network slicing, then what is the question? So that's the first question I'd like to put to the panel. And I think I'll start off, I'll put to you, Patrik. Network slicing is the answer, what's the question?
Okay, so first, maybe two things. Titan.ium platform is delivering mobile core software, so I'm representing a vendor on this panel. So my answers will be more from the vendor perspective. And to the question, also a prequel, to me network slicing is a technology that enables a use case that needs to be monetizable. Yeah, no one will introduce a use case that will not pay off. So to answer the question, or what is the question? To me, network slicing, if you have a monetizable service that needs or requires a secure network with dedicated QoS characteristics, then network slicing is the answer. So again, secure network with dedicated QoS characteristics that is needed for a monetizable service. The network slicing as a technology enables the service. It doesn't create any fortune on its own.
Cool. Thank you. Good answer. We don't hear security as being one of those key things that often. So that's really good. Ankush, same question to you.
Right. I work for 3, and one of our focus area is 5G. We own the biggest 5G spectrum in the country, right? So now 5G promises a lot of things. 5G is talking about revolutionizing the industry. We are talking about Industry 4.0. But all these industrial use cases basically are very demanding because what they need is dedicated or guaranteed quality of service, whether it be network reliability, latency, throughput, and so on. Now, and that's difficult to implement with a public network. So what's happening around the world is that this is happening by virtue of 5G private networks, because that's where currently we are able to guarantee those kind of quality of service. But the issue with the 5G private network is that they are very expensive. They are not scalable. They work for the trials and the test, but when it tries to scale up to the hundreds of 5G networks, it's not a commercially viable solution, both from the enterprise perspective and from the operator perspective. Their operational overheads, commercial overheads, it's not. So essentially, we need a cost-effective, operational effective solution to provide guarantee of service or guaranteed QoS to an enterprise, and network slicing is one of the answers. It is still in a very nascent stage, but it's developing. But probably, we are looking at network slicing as the answer.
Cool. Alex?
What is the question indeed? Sitting here representing business for BT, it always has to start with the question, and it comes back to the customer. And the question to the customer is always, what is the outcome? What does your business need? What is it that you're hoping to achieve for your business? And so, you've absolutely got to start with the customer and start with the customer's outcomes. And in which case it might be, as my fellow panelists have talked about, that they need, that low latency, high resiliency. I need to shout. Shall I start again? So sitting here representing business, and I will start again just in case anybody missed it, the question saying, what is the question? We always have to ask customers, what is the question? understanding what customers' outcomes are, and then understanding what the customer needs the technology to do, the answer may very well be that it is network slicing, because as my panelists have already talked about, and that they need low latency, high resiliency, and we always talk about security. I don't know about others, but we always talk about security because it's absolutely paramount. And you're right, we are rolling out private 5G to many customers, and there is a cost element to that. That cost is coming down, and there is a lot more that we can do on private 5G or flavors of private 5G. And so until you've really understood what it is that customers actually want, you can't actually answer that network slicing is always going to be the answer.
Thank you very much. So thinking a bit about the commercial aspect, how does network slicing help to improve the returns for operators, and then also improve the costs or the cost to employ us, and add value to the enterprises and the subscribers? So probably Alex, can I put that to you?
It comes back to all of those different flavours. It's about us being able to do the best on BT, being able to slice that spectrum so that we're able to, parsey that, so we're able to provide other new services to customers. If we think about the user cases that are out there that are needing those high resiliency, high secure environments, whether it is for emergency services, whether it's for media or broadcast, whether it's for manufacturing, you can start to see actually getting more out of what we've got and being able to use it with other network type solutions as well. So the monetization is about being able to offer different solutions for all of our customers, being able to offer a smorgasbord of opportunities to the customers, and then starting to think about, are there onward models, maybe a tenanting type model as well.
Cool. Good. So Ankush, well, I think one for you. You brought up around private networks, and then Alex just brought up about broadcasting and other use cases. So would you say that network slicing is going to help us to mold the demand of the network?
Yes, I think the whole purpose of network slicing is based on the concept of virtualization. It's a pay-as-you-use kind of model, right? So instead of paying for whatever you're not using, you're going to use for the future, the customer is going to pay for what they need. Because one of the key use case for network slicing is that I'll allocate you the resources, and not just the resources, but along with the guaranteed QoS for the demand that we have currently. So we call it as a dynamic network slicing, and dynamic network slicing is what will bring value to the customer. And when it brings value to the customer, the operator benefits automatically. So the whole ecosystem is interlocked with each other, and brings the value to the entire platform.
Cool, nice.
I think the demand is just going to grow as the art of, we've already seen with private 5G, more and more user cases coming up with, the only limitation is almost our imagination. And I think it's the same with slicing. We're not there in terms of thinking about those user cases. So the demand, will just grow as our imaginations grow.
Mm-hmm. How have you seen that demand? Network slicing has been around as a concept, and we've gradually done things around it. How have you seen that grow and change over time, or how do you see that evolving in the future? And that's for anyone who wants to answer.
So, network slicing technology is not new. Yeah, it has shown up 3 or more years ago with 3GPP release 15, I guess. And a lot of thought has been spent on how to basically bring it into the first 5G networks, and it simply didn't happen. Yeah. But now, with the evolution of the 5G core, that we now will more and more address the verticals and enterprises, as you mentioned, and also with the rise of AI, and we will probably come to that during the panel, the network slicing is, in my opinion, moving back into the focus. Yeah? So it's to me, it's verticals that is the targeted customer space or customer market. I think of use cases like vertical healthcare. They may want to, I don't know, track the movement of artificial hips, implemented to people, dedicated group of people. And for that, they need a dedicated network with, like you said, with dedicated QoS characteristics. But on top of that, they want to have this network to be secure. Yeah. I mean, this is really sensitive data that you deal with. So when you have an offering that can deliver both the QoS characteristics, the network, along with the security, then I believe that such a use case is perfectly viable. And also enterprises, enterprises, they run their own business, they don't care about networks. They also will first demand security from something like network slice subsystem. They don't want to deal with technology, 5G, anything. They have their own stuff to do.
You're spot on about the industries. When we think about smart apostrophe ports, whether that's a seaport, an airport, or any other type of port out there, that segregation to be able to create safety for people, safety around the data, that's absolutely that user case. We see it in 5G from a private point of view, but absolutely will have the same applicability when we get to all of that slicing.
On the port, we have recently implemented a use case on one of the Hutchison port as part of the UK government's 5G test and trial. Okay, that works really well with a private 5G network. But if you think about autonomous vehicle, right? So you cannot deploy a private 5G network to deploy use cases for autonomous vehicle, right? And this is where I think these are the type of use cases where the network slicing will come into the picture and will be very effective if implemented correctly.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, totally agree. So we're doing a lot of security at the moment. We're talking a lot about security. So how does network slicing deliver that security to people? Is there any key technology within that, or key part? So
I can cover that from the mobile core perspective. So yeah, the standards 3GPP defines exactly how network slice selection and authentication of the clients into a network slice shall happen. So first, you do the network slicing, or you create a network slice subsystem by isolation. You can really spin up, automated provisioning of network slice is a key if we come to that. You spin up a network slice subsystem, and then you make the first decision, whether you will share your network functions in your 5G mobile core across multiple slices. Then you can run already into a multi-tenancy problem where one network function is dealing with multiple slices and the associated data that you later on need to separate. So you make the decision for the security reasons to deploy an isolated network slice subsystem comprising dedicated network function. And then the second decision to apply security to the mobile core network slice is whether you opt for the authentication of the devices into the network slice, such as the network slice cannot be entered by a client just based on the provisioned data and the capability of the user equipment that can be manipulated, but also on login credentials that you need in addition to basically enter with your signaling, routing, and data the targeted network slice. So that's from the mobile core perspective.
Yeah, I think one of the key concerns from the enterprise with respect to the network slicing is actually security. Okay, because at the end of the day, we are using a shared spectrum and also a shared backend core system, right? So how do you ensure security when you are allocating the virtual resources for a particular enterprise? How do you ensure that it doesn't interfere with other use cases we are developing for other enterprises, right? So these are the concerns we are hearing in the market right now. But I think this is same like what it used to be 5-6 years down the line before, when we started to move to cloud. There were a lot of concerns from the industry about moving data to the cloud, right? And slowly, those concerns have diminished because those actions have been taken. So I think there will be some regulation evolvement happening in this space, which will ensure better security, or at least, it is still secure, but it will give kind of assurance to the enterprise about the security aspect. So regulation will play an important role here.
I think the other thing from a pure architecting point of view, we've all spent a lot of time, following mandates from the government. We've all, re-architected our core and our RAN, so it's got, brand new technology, right the way from the brand new, hardware in particular from the RAN and core, let alone what we're doing from a security point of view. So you've got the architecting, you've got new hardware in there as mandated, so we've all gone through a huge amount of change. And then you've got the piece around actually, if you are going to do a dedicated slice, actually how you then put the walls around that, so that actually for that particular enterprise, particularly if it's a sensitive enterprise, how you can deliver that.
That's fair. That's fair. We've also talked about private networks, and you've talked about it in security and people wanting to separate their work and things like that. Are we at the tipping point to say a private network is not a private network, it's now a network slice that turns into a private network? Is this private networks at scale? Is that where we are? Or are we seeing that demand? Any examples?
I would say that, network slicing is an evolution of the private network. It's a more, as I said in the beginning, it's a more cost-effective way of deploying the private network, right? So there will be, of course, with respect to the private network, there is always because it is private to that organization, so they have got pretty much everything to themselves, right? And here they'll be using a shared spectrum, a shared resources. I think the challenge from the MNO's perspective is to ensure that we provide the same experience that the enterprise has, if they deploy a private network on their own, right? As my fellow panelists say, from the enterprise perspective, from the customer perspective, it doesn't matter what technology you deploy, whether you deploy private 5G network or you deploy a network slicing. At the end of the day, it's a customer experience which matters. It's their, whether they can fulfill their use cases, whether fulfill their security requirements, QoS requirements. I think as long as we provide those capabilities, it should not matter to the enterprise what is the underlying infrastructure, underlying technology we are using.
I think it comes back to that smorgasbord, doesn't it? There will be absolutely times when you need, a highly critical 5G, or later on 6G, 5G, private network. Is it that you have got surveillance using computer vision where you need, artificial intelligence to be able to look at the visuals from cameras to be able to determine what's happening on a crane or on a critical secure environment? There will be other times when actually being able to have the pervasive bit of a slice to be able to do something on a much wider area will be the right thing. So I think that it will be, different flavours depending on what the organisation needs, coming back to those outcomes. And so it will only be this or it will only be that. It will be a mixture. And, I think that customers expect us to be able to provide those licorice all sorts, those mixture of different technologies, to be able to knit them all together, to be able to come with the outcome that they want with that beautiful wrap of security.
I would like to add one note. I would like to relax the relation between private network and network slice, such as we don't use it as a synonym, because the private network implemented as a network slice, that works nicely if you have like kind of static private network, like enterprise, can be campus, can be hospital, can be factory. But there are also private networks that simply cannot or do not want to maintain connection to a carrier service provider. Yeah, those like tactical bubbles, they probably, or first response team, disaster response, or or some tactical bubbles in a desert. How can you always rely on an internet connection that brings you into a network slice of your carrier operator? So again, private networks, network slices, that works well for dedicated specific private networks that can maintain connection to the carrier network, but there are also these standalone private networks that need to operate solely on their own, without the support of any carrier. That's just what I want to add, such as we don't use it for equal.
That's fair. So follow-on question around that, and we talked about customers and things around that. How do we make network slicing? It's complicated. Network slicing is complicated. We work in telecoms, everything's complicated. And we love it to be complicated as well. So how do we make that simple for customers? And customers, I mean the enterprise to understand what it is and what they want or what they need to have. The developer to understand it's available, I can use it, I can deploy it. And then the consumer as well and say, well, do you need a network slice? Do you even care? How do we make that simple, either to them to understand and then also to deploy for us as well?
I can add to that. I would optimally make it invisible to the enterprise. I mean, why should an enterprise that has completely different things to do understand network slicing? Yeah. So they run their own business, and for that they need a secure network with dedicated QoS characteristics, and that's what we need to take care about. And you need to, in order to monetize that business and the service that runs in a network slice, you really need to automate the things around it and make them really secure. Otherwise, because there must be also a revenue share between the carrier provider that implements the network slice and the vendors that deliver the equipment and the solutions, there must be a fair revenue share out of that. And it shall not end up in the decisions that with network slicing we can also target the top 10 largest enterprises in the country, while the rest of the hundreds and thousands enterprises simply will not monetize. So we need to find a way how to automate those processes, such as really, majority of the enterprises can benefit from this technology.
Mm-hmm.
A customer said to me not so long ago, he said, Alex, could we just have a contract that's a bit like a Twitter line that says it's 140 characters, this is the outcome, this is the uptime, this will suffice for my company, or words to that effect. I'm paraphrasing slightly. And so that comes back to, what you were just saying there in terms of that invisibility of the technology. And so if you think about the invisibility of the technology and the outcome, and a contract that is, well, I know it's 280 characters on Twitter now, but when it was back at 140, to be able to just deliver the uptime and the outcome that they need regardless of the underlying infrastructure. And I think that's where we as technologists in the room have to make sure that we can deliver that for our customers. So whether it is a slice, whether it is SD-WAN, whether it is a private network or any of the other types of solutions that we can give to customers. The invisibility cloak, the Harry Potter of networks, yes.
Yeah, although we are talking about the enterprises mostly, but we cannot forget about our consumers, right? So I think from the consumer perspective, they have got a lot of benefit out of. We can provide a lot of differential service to our consumers. For example, the people who are more into gaming, we can provide them the QoS based on low latency QoS. So they can subscribe to probably a bit of a premium tariff, but they will get that kind of guaranteed latency to continue on their gaming. So if you look at that example that we had earlier on the train, when the train goes through the tunnel, that person will still be able to play his game, right? So or her, right? So I think that is what the consumers is also going to benefit. Of course, there may be a premium price to it, but they have got the guarantee of service reliability, and so on. So consumer is a big market, and they will be one of the biggest beneficiaries of this network slicing.
There's a beautiful symbiosis almost between the enterprise and the consumer.
Indeed.
Because everybody gains as we make more and more traction.
Indeed, that's a.
So the invisibility cloak, what is it? What technically does it end up being, and when's it going to be here? So what's the technical enablers of whatever it is that we need to put on top of this to make sure we can deliver it, and we deliver it in a nice, simple way?
One of the key technical enabler for 5G is for the network slicing is the upgrade of the 5G core to a standalone architecture. Okay, because as Mark said, we like to make things complicated in telecom, and 3GPP makes the life easier for us by introducing new functions with every G technologies, right? So with the 5G SA, this all the functions which relates to the network slicing has been introduced in the 5G standalone core architecture. Okay, so that's one of the basic enabler for the operators to offer that kind of a service that we are talking about here. Then another enabler is that, but what that will do is that that will enable the operators to provide the network slice, but we also need to have the slices dynamically adjusted. So in order for the slices to be dynamically adjusted, we need to monitor the network in real time, monitor our customer experience in real time. And that's where the OSS monitoring systems comes into the picture. And then as a next step, we need to be, so if you look at the current cloud deployments, they are quite static. We assign thresholds. If you breach the threshold, then we scale up, scale down. But when it comes to the network slicing, we want this scale up, scale down on a dynamic baseline. So this is where the AI and ML comes into the picture. So using ML, I should be able to dynamically baseline my QoS, and then ensure that closed loop automation so that to scale up or scale down my slices. And going forward, with the help of AI, we'll be able to predict the QoS degradations. Okay, and then before it hits the customer, we'll be able to upgrade the QoS to ensure that we are meeting our SLA timelines. So yeah, so in my opinion, these are the 4 key enablers: 5GSA, ML, and then the artificial intelligence on the top.
I think the other thing, I think you're absolutely spot on, in terms of the SA architecture. But coming back to that question about, what are customers actually going to use it for? Yeah. You can't actually just look at it in isolation. One of the things that we've done at BT is we've created a partner board, and that partner board has got a representative set of partners. And actually it's about making sure that everything works on an end-to-end basis. Customers need not only our technology to work, but they need other people's technologies to work together to really integrate and knit so that on an end-to-end basis that it works. So the invisibility cloak is not only what's happening in our networks, what's happening in our network architectures. It's not only about how we are dynamically, moving things up, moving things down with artificial intelligence and machine learning, but actually how it's working with those other applications, because actually the outcome won't be achieved if everything doesn't knit together. And so actually the invisibility cloak actually is a little bit wider than just us. It's actually it's the ecosystem being able to knit together so that actually you get the service, the SLAs, and the security that customers need.
Talking about, we could talk about AI, but let's talk about the ecosystem. So we're telecoms. We're absolutely terrible at developing ecosystems, and that's a generalisation. We're not that bad.
That's definitely a generalisation.
So we're improving. We're working really hard to try to do ecosystems. So in terms of ecosystems, what do we have to do to try to do that? How do we extend and engage with the ecosystems? And maybe it's AI as part of that to make sure that we're delivering the service they want, and network slicing may be one of those services.
So I mean, before we come to AI-driven use cases, the enablers for network slices, in my opinion, is definitely the automation of the provisioning. I mean, when you don't manage that process successfully, then there will be no profitable business with a network slice. When there is a network demand, you need to act fast, and it must be low cost or money for nothing to the operator to spin up the network. And then the second thing is I always differentiate between network slices that is a logical network on top of the 5GSA mobile core or radio, and between network slice subsystems. And I'm somewhat in favor of the network slice subsystems, because in logical network slices, when you can have one physical network function that is serving multiple network slices, you immediately enter a lot of other problems here, which is the separation of the KPI, separation of the config, separation of alarms. Yeah? I mean, if you look at a component that is involved in multiple slices, and you say, why do I see 10 alarms? What of them are relevant to me? Yeah? And then you may deal with vendors that didn't think of this multi-tenancy. They say, of course we support network slicing, and then you realize there are a lot of operational issues. So provisioning, like you said, monitoring, visualization, that needs to really be elevated to operate within the network slice that you create. And I cannot say whether all vendors are simply there yet and think of these problems that can come out of the operations. And then to the AI, I mean, AI AI will need network slicing. Yeah? We are talking about AI driving network slice specific decisions like scaling or adjusting QoS, which is all correct. But AI will need network slicing by definition because you need to run somewhere digital twins that will create input into artificial intelligence. And we need to run digital twins to verify the output of the artificial intelligence algorithm. And where do you want to run that? Do you want to spin up a dedicated network for that, or do you want to spin up a slice as a sandbox, delivering a testing environment for the implementation of the AI? So besides monetizing network slicing for services that you deliver to enterprises or to verticals, and I'm really happy that Ankush mentioned that we are not talking about enterprises, there are gamers and other verticals, but network slicing also is a vehicle to judge where is the lower cost for something that you need to do anyway. Yeah? So when you need to spin up a test environment, secure test environment with, again, dedicated QoS characteristics, a secure sandbox, you can build a dedicated network for that, or you can also implement a network slice. And I believe that artificial intelligence will make use of network slicing during the implementation of the artificial intelligence, input, output, digital twins in between. Yeah.
Right. If you look at the ecosystem in general, right, so it comprises of many parties from the operator, when we sit on the operator's seat. So you have got the vendors providing the providing the technology. You have got your customers utilizing the technology. Then you have got your managed service providers doing the operating model. So I think this whole operating model needs to be simplified, because if you look at, you cannot have, and that's where you cannot have multiple teams looking after different slices or different parts of the network, right? We need to provide bring some synergy across those teams, including the customer, including our enterprise customers, and then simplify that operating model. And of course, as my fellow panelists has said, the automation will play a very major role in this whole operation aspect. Because what we want to, at the end of the day, we are all trying to save OpEx. Okay, so one of the beauty, but if we stick to the current operating model and think about having monitoring in place for dedicated network slices, that's not going to work. So we need to bring the synergy in our operating model. We need to bring automation into the picture so that we can deliver the value to our customers. Because at the end of the day, we need to also save on the OpEx, and which we can then pass it on to our customers.
I suppose, when you talk about the ecosystem there's got a sort of narrow view of the ecosystem rather than the broader view of the ecosystem. And I think that our customers would probably expect us to have a much broader view of the ecosystem. And I think that, in previous days, people have been much more, competitive. And I think today the world is much more co-opetition. There are times when absolutely we want to fight, but then there are times when you and I should absolutely be working, hand in glove together to get the right outcomes for customers. And so I think that the ecosystem is a mixture of absolute, partners who are providing a layer that's going to deliver some of the outcome to customers. But then there will be times when actually, you need to be able to work together. If we think about from an IoT point of view, you think about national roaming, roaming on and off, one another's networks to be able to provide the outcomes for customers. So I think that's actually, we've got to think about the ecosystem in its broadest sense. I think we've got to probably think less about competition and thinking much more about actually how we can all work together to get the right outcomes for customers.
Thank you.
And the question is whether like regulatory authorities needs to be part of the ecosystem, especially when it comes to network slicing, because they also have things to say or things to claim that may slow down or speed up or block.
Well, there's a very big regulatory agenda. We have a very big regulatory team, and they spend a lot of time talking to regulators, and I'm going to leave that team talking to the regulators, and they can answer that question.
That was going to be my penultimate question, was about the regulatory environment. The regulatory environment's been in place since email was a killer app, I think was what we said. And so how has that got to change? Is that something we need to work on?
I think with anything, it's good to talk. I think that was an old BT advert, wasn't it? And, whether it's, regulators, partners, ecosystems, co-opetition, I think, together, we'll be able to solve the regulatory conundrum the more that we talk.
Yeah, we have recently received a TSA, right, Telecom Security Act. And I'm sure that with network slicing, we are going to see more of those kind of new regulations coming into the picture, because we are talking about sharing our public spectrum across multiple enterprises. So there will be concerns around security, and the regulators will step up and to alleviate those concerns and ensure a fair play as well, because there's also a question about net neutrality. For example, if you're providing differential service at a premium rate, then you may not be guaranteeing that kind of service to the normal customers. So there is a regulator. The regulators will play a very important role in this one, and I'm sure there will be new regulations coming in this aspect.
Yeah, I also believe that the carrier network operators and the regulations and the regulatory bodies, they need to work together, because behind every law there is a reason. Yeah. And the question is now whether the reason behind the net neutrality law is blocking something that was not intended to target in the first place. Yeah, I agree that everybody should have equal access to internet and enjoy internet at no additional charges or hidden costs. That's what the law is about. But when it then comes to, no offense, like metaverse service providers that consume, 80% of the bandwidth at no additional cost because it's the law, then it's questionable. And also network slicing needs to deliver dedicated QoS characteristics. We agree to that. I mean, massive scale and ultra-low latency, those are different ballparks. Yeah? And I believe that here the law, if it's possible, it should be adjusted, because it's not what it has initially targeted, in my humble opinion.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to draw the panel to close with one last thing, which is if network slicing the answer, what's the question? So a single answer. Alex?
Outcomes.
Outcomes. Anish?
Cost effectiveness.
Cost effectiveness. And Patrik?
Security.
Security, there you go. So, questions, I think? Yeah?
Thank you, Mark. And thank you to the panelists. It's great. Are there any questions before we break? I've got one here, please.
Yeah, Pradeep from Cineverse. Obviously, a lot of work useful work has gone into developing the concept of network slicing further. So my question is, if you look at let us say creating value for verticals, that is the biggest proposition network slicing brings. But from a standards perspective, only 5 slice service types have been defined by 3GPP yet, out of the 128 standardized values possible. So you have obviously the EMBB, URLLC, you have the massive IoT, you have the V2X, and you have the high performance machine type communications. Those are the only 5 values defined. So if you are taking this to the verticals, to the industries, for example, automotive. So as a mobile operator, you take the proposition of network slicing to an automotive company, or to a mining company, or to a healthcare, or to you can go on and on and on. And all of these then have their, no two automotive companies the same. They all have different needs. So how do you expand this standards framework to not just have 5, but to have, all the 256 values possible to deliver them a highly customized, personalized experience that they want from network slice. So I think we are very limited, we are very cautious in our approach to develop the framework to bring the full value that network slicing can actually deliver.
I can have a go first. Right, I think, when it comes to the network slicing or 5G as in general, right, the possibilities are endless. So but we have to make a start somewhere, right? And we don't want to have a big bang approach. We don't want to boil the ocean once. So what's happening here is that we are taking a very stepwise or cautious approach. We want to target one vertical segment first, or 2 or 3 vertical segments first. Mainly, if you look at the main deployments, it's on the automotive, mainly, manufacturing, as well as, on the ports and all. Okay, so these are the 3 main vertical segments they are being targeted. Okay, so that, because this technology itself is in a very nascent stage, it will take time to evolve and mature. So probably once it's like the technology S-curve, right? When it reaches a certain level of maturity, then we'll be able to, roll out to a wider business segment. So I think that's why, probably we are taking a very cautious approach when it comes to the network slicing.
I think, like you, we're focusing on 5 different verticals that we're working on at the moment. Similarly to you, transport and logistics, manufacturing, smart spaces, looking at smart ports and others. I think that there's an awful lot of work to do. As you said, there's only 5 that have come up in the standards at the moment, and I think, hence we are all on that journey at the moment. I also think that whilst all organisations think they're unique, actually one of the things that we certainly have all learnt on all of the other types of technologies that we've worked on with customers, whether it's private 5G or when we look at networks or we look at SD-WAN, there is a certain amount of that 80-20 rule. And actually, you get, when we go and have conversations with people about, private 5G networks, there is certainly 80% of commonality, whether we're talking to one auto manufacturer or another auto manufacturer, we're talking to one port or another port. 20% is unique to them. And I think it's that 20% where we're all probably having a look at so that we can get a commonality of standards, move out from the 5. I'm not sure we're going to get to 256, but we'll certainly move up from 5. And then we can work on what the differential is between the 80 and the 20.
So I also believe that the 5 defined network slice IDs is not restrictive. Yeah, I assume that there are reserved values that are simply allocated for these 5 use cases, but it doesn't restrict you to create differentiated services out of these 5 value or even create a network slice type out of the reserved space for your own use case. But your question brings an interesting aspect, how you then basically enable the user equipment to interact with a dedicated network slice, and what if the user equipment can access multiple network slices? How will you manage the burden on the user to basically provision the user equipment with the right information if there are many slices to track? So if a device only logs into one dedicated slice, it could be pre-configured, if it's IoT or whatever. But if there is a use case that a device would access multiple slices and switch based on the use case, that could be a little bit more complicated to the user. So yeah, there is an aspect of how the device will request the associated slice. But the slice identities that you mentioned, they can be allocated out of the reserved use case, reserved ID space, and then by using service differentiators, even broken down to the next granularity level. If I'm correct, I believe it's so.
Excellent. Thank you very much.